Hey everybody, welcome once again to Rise of the GM podcast, where today we're going to talk about a character on the edge of a cliff. We're going to talk about how we plan our campaigns, how we start that process, and then a petty, childless nepotist, all that and more here on Rise of the GM. Well, hey everybody, welcome once again to Rise of the GM. I'm Matthew and this is Adam, and we are here today to talk a little bit about what goes on in the whole campaign planning. But before that, Adam, how's your week going this week?
It is going pretty decent, Been a little tired, a little cloudy outside, so, you know.
We've had sunny days here. Yesterday was like 76 degrees. It was beautiful. Today I went out and tried to walk before I got to work today, and it was a little bit more chilly. It was like in the 40 to 50 degree range, but it was still sunny here, so that at least was good. I don't know what it is now because I don't have a window in my office. As a matter of fact, I forgot to turn on all my lights today. I hope you can see me all right. But we're closing in, so we both work with college-age students on college campuses, and so we very much abide by the college schedule, and we're getting ready to head into Thanksgiving. So we have the remainder of this week in 1 week, and then we have a week off for Thanksgiving. Then we come back for 2 weeks of school, a week of finals, and then we're out for Thanksgiving or for Christmas. So this time of year, we're getting ready to have a couple big breaks, and I'm ready because, like you, it's been a long semester so far, and I understand those of you in the work world who might be listening to this. You're like, I just work all the time. There's never a break. You spoiled brats, you. But I'm ready to be spoiled.
It's true. It's true.
Of course, I say that, and then I was just telling Adam before this started. My daughter's birthday is on the Sunday, the 19th, and so we have a big celebration that day. Big celebration. We go out to Barnes and Noble all day. That's a celebration to me.
Oh yeah.
And then Monday we have off. Then Tuesday we're doing homeschool Thanksgiving because our family actually homeschools. Wednesday we have off. Thursday we have my family Thanksgiving. Friday we have off. Saturday we have my wife's family Thanksgiving. And then the week's done. And I feel like every other day is like such a... it's going to be so busy by the time the end of this Thanksgiving week. Hopefully I feel rested and thankful, full of gratitude, right?
It's like one of those like old school like 7-day celebrations is what that feels like. You just party the whole week. So.
We have the Feast of the Tents, then followed by the Feast of feast all over the place. But yeah, I'm looking forward to it. It should be good.
Yeah, it's
I
was gonna jump in. One thing I got to do this week, just talking about the week, was our gaming crew that's here on our campus at Indiana State. The Open Tabletop Role-Playing Games group. I got to play with them this Monday, and that was a lot of fun. They had what they called a raid night, and they had 3 different tables of people all attacking this castle at the same time. So that was like a really interesting, actually, Matthew, like reminded me a lot of the Wabathon kind of idea. You had to like, as GMs, like be working together quite a bit of like, we were using Discord and we're like, all right, they're coming in the entryway. All right, they're going through the back door, like that kind of stuff. And it was pretty interesting to see how that played out. They were working together, whereas like the Wabathon was kind of a more competitive, like, I don't know, Hunger Games kind of thing. But that was pretty fun. So I got to see some new stuff and play with some fun people Monday too. So that was good.
That does sound like fun.
Yeah.
I always love those when they have kind of hey, here's a little different take on how a one shot could be run, and that's probably a longer one shot. I don't know how long you guys went.
Yeah, I was. I want to say, I think it was less than 4 hours. We were kind of like in the room.
That's not
for
too
about 4,
bad.
so it's about like what we do on Thursdays. So
for us, that's a regular session night. Every party has different. I just can't imagine like trying to do it in 2 hours. So you got to have at least. We start at 6:30 ish, and we get done around 10:30, 11. So whatever that is, works out pretty well for us. But I had a guy come in this week and talk to me about he's getting the. I don't know if it's a pre-order. He's not got it yet, but he's about to receive the Last of the Airbender RPG, and he's pretty excited about it. Now, I actually have not gotten into Airbender stuff. I know several friends who have. My son right now is super excited about that, and he's never watched one. I don't even know how he knows. He's like, oh yeah, Airbenders do this, and Firebenders do that, and Waterbender. And I'm like, how do you know all this?
That maybe but anyway, faults. I don't know.
Your kids.
Yeah.
So anyway, this guy's like, hey, we need to do that sometime. So I'm trying to find a special out of our normal gaming
Yeah.
schedule, a special night at the beginning of next semester when this guy can come and maybe for some of our students and a few of us run a Last of the Airbenders RPG, and maybe I'll find out what it's all about. My son just claims that Airbenders are the most awesome ones, and with the name of the show or game being Last of the Airbenders, I would assume that's true.
Yeah, I wonder. So Sam, who was on last week, he hooked me up with Last of the Airbender RPG book not long ago.
Hey, maybe it's already out.
I'm wondering if it's. I don't know. It may be a different edition, or because it was new. I'm pretty sure it's a new thing. So
it may be that this guy just ordered it and it hasn't
now
come
got
in
it.
yet.
Yeah. That's cool. I'll have to show you my copy because it's pretty cool stuff. I think I made a character, but I don't know. We haven't played it yet. So
were you an Airbender?
No, I went Earthbender.
You.
It's that defender like protection role that I.
Oh yeah, I would never do that. Anyway,
air would actually be pretty good for you. You can, I think, mobility is pretty good.
Talking my language. Are there strike possibilities with it?
Oh yeah.
Oh man, you got me. You had me at strike and mobility. All right. Well, hey, let's get into some of our normal segments for this week. We're starting. So occasionally we part from the Gnome Stew Eureka book, which by the way is great, and you need to look at that and check that out. But we'll stray away to this guy on Instagram. Is that what it is? He just posts these like little pictures with a small encounter hook or a game starter. And so I don't know if you have a graphic for that or anything.
I will on our Instagram for sure. I don't have it now, but
we need to pull that up and then just share the screen and pop it up sometime as we do these, just so people can see them. But go ahead and read that to us, and let's see what that would do as far as getting us started with an encounter here.
Yeah, so this is Dungeon Influence is the name of the account on Instagram, and I will share that on our page. But this is Game Hook 12 from them. It says this: after a hard battle, you defeated your enemy and almost knocked him off the cliff. With his last strength, he tries to get a hold of the cliff and shouts, "Without me, you can never defeat him." That's it.
And that's it.
That's it. What do you do with that?
So they leave it completely open, don't they? You don't know, was this guy we were fighting a strong bad guy, or was he kind of a weak and groveling bad guy? It sounds like if you finally defeat him, he had to have some power, but evidently he's not the big bad, and you might not have known it until this moment when he's like hanging on the edge of a cliff and he's like, wait, without me, you never will defeat him. And you have to, in my mind, it's like, oh yeah, is he just trying to do anything he can to save his skin, or is there really a big bad? And but at the same time, it might plant that idea in the PC's minds that there is somebody bigger, and we've got to pull this guy up and figure out who it is. But at the same time, not just give this guy every grace in the world. So I don't know. Yeah, what would you do with that, Adam?
Yeah, I think that's an interesting, like you were talking about, even that question of like, what kind of enemy is this for them? And I do think the way that's posed, it does sound like a tougher one, or maybe even like, oh, I thought this was the villain that we've been working against. But I almost wonder, like, if you were in just one of those kind of, I don't want to say random fights, but the more like day-to-day kind of battles that seem to happen in role-playing games, if one of the enemies brought in something like that, of like, they're about to have the final strike's about to knock them out, and they're like, no, wait. If without me, like this, whether it's without me, you can't defeat him, or without me, like this, something's going to happen. I do find that interesting, because I would, as a player, again, it's like, oh, is that just like, you're just bartering for your life kind of thing? That would have to get looked into. But that is that peeling back of the onion, that like we've talked about a little bit, just with gaming of, okay, what's the next threat? And maybe this person, that's a lead in, a plot hook into to like lead that in there. Maybe they're just biding their time until they can betray them, kind of thing. I think you can do a lot with bringing that in and making characters take a pause instead of just, well, I just kick him off the cliff and we go on, so.
And maybe more than just like I have knowledge. What might be really cool is to there's something special about this guy, about
Yeah.
his blood, about his lineage, about something
Right.
that he is destined to play a part in the downfall of this great enemy. And because of that, the enemy has like kind of kicked, either come after him and he's had to leave his town. And so he
Yeah.
turned to maybe fighting or to robbery or thievery or whatever it is that got you into a fight with him. But then you find out, oh, now I have to kind of protect this guy because it's not just he has knowledge, but he's key to this thing's downfall at the end. But he's also duplicitous and he could stab our backs at any moment and run. So we've got to, it's like witness protection, but you also got to keep an eye on him.
Right.
And so,
Yeah. Yeah. I
and
like
maybe
that.
he even has to play parts in that. So you can't just say, okay, we're going to stick you in this safe house or in this porta fortress and you're just going to sit there. But like he has to do stuff. And so there has to be a trust, something like that. I don't know.
Yeah. I think it's interesting to think about that as a key. I almost, the thing that came up to my mind briefly was like the first like Pirates of the Caribbean, where you have William Turner, who's the blood of the guy who had taken the gold, and it's like the last piece of like, we got to get this gold piece back, and we need the blood of this person to like lift this curse. It's kind of in that realm of like, yeah, they are needed, and if they just die, we've actually unleashed something, or we've hurt the world because this can't be dealt with, or that. Yeah, that's a really cool idea. Even more so because knowledge, I think the thing about the knowledge thing, like you said, was there is a point where, okay, we're just going to retrieve the knowledge and now we don't need this person anymore, versus how do we keep them around, and
the best part is make this dude a burr in their saddle. Don't make it some submissive dude who's like, okay, yeah, no, you guys beat me fair and square, I'll help. And you go, I think this guy should be pushing against you, and like in small ways, like making things harder for you, informing people about you, causing your life to be like dangerous, and for certain missions to fail because he doesn't like you, but you've got to keep him because he's needed for this. And so there becomes either this huge like this emotional investment happens much more than if somebody's just submissive and going along for the ride. So I would do that, burn the saddle all the way.
Yeah, I think that is good too, because I've noticed with NPCs that fall into this, like we actually have some of those now, in the game I'm running, or that you guys have interacted with, where it's like, oh yeah, they're with you, but they just kind of get lost in the background. And I guess they're there, like there's not really, at times there hasn't been as much interaction.
I'm thinking about Vers. And the one thing you did, he's a guy in a campaign that Adam is running, but the one thing you did that I loved was when he grabbed somebody and jumped over the edge. And we knew, hey, we got to save him, but we also got to save her. But dang it, why is he doing this? And so, like, again, that was the burr in the saddle a bit. And I think in that, he was much more noticeable than all those other ones where he was somewhere back there. And we never even thought of his name until the fight was done or whatever. It's like, oh yeah, is he with us? Yeah, I think he's with us. Yeah, no, we left him in the port. No, he's here. And that whole thing. So
yeah, for sure.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, hey, let's get into our main topic for today, and I'm going to let Adam kick this one off because this is first in a 3-part series of planning, and it's exciting to start from this level and get smaller. Adam, why don't you explain what it is?
Yeah, for sure. So just as I was looking through just topics, one of the things that came up when I was kind of polling people or thinking about my own needs as far as like getting started as a GM, or even now, is planning. It's like, how do you plan effectively? What does that look like if maybe you've never done it before? Or like, how do you even start? I sometimes there's just so much, and we talk a lot of like mechanics and how do we deal with these things, but even just from the like planning a story, the narrative arc kind of thing, it can get kind of overwhelming to think about, all right, I'm planning on running this game for a year of game time, and I want it to be awesome, and it's like, well, we kind of get buried under some of that stuff. So the idea was to talk about some of our and just share like the way that we approach things, which I I know we've hit on a little bit, but to kind of get deeper into that, and we're gonna get smaller as we go. I kind of went back and forth with that a little bit, to be honest, of like, do we start small and get larger? But I think for me, at least, a lot of times I'm thinking a little more holistically at the beginning when I'm not first running a one shot and then
Right.
turn it into a campaign. And then when it's like, oh, this is a campaign, trying to think more holistically, bigger. Okay, now what about like these arcs that go within the campaign? And then like, okay, now I'm like focused on what does a session this week look like, kind of thing. So yeah, the next three will be that. Today we're talking about just campaign prep and how we kind of approach that when we're kind of walking into a season where we're going to run a game. So with that being said, I don't know, I can jump in, or if you have like initial thoughts, Matthew, on that.
Oh, I have lots of thoughts, but I don't know. Maybe you should jump in first because I get going and I carry you away from your thoughts, and you're like, I was thinking something earlier, and you just talked for 72,000 minutes in a row. It's a lot.
I took my own advice this week and actually made notes, so I can stay on track a little bit. But I ask, we've talked about this, and I even on our Instagram, I had put some questions down for actually session building, but it's that idea of the questions and asking questions. And one of them for me, when I am looking at like, okay, I'm up to run a game, or maybe I kind of get an idea in my head. I'm like, oh, that'd be really sweet to work with, on a campaign. One of the questions I start with is like, where would I actually want this to resolve? So I'm going all the way to the end, and I don't ever want to railroad. We've talked about that over and over, of not just like forcing people into a mold of a story. But I do think like looking to that end result, whether it's even like, okay, this is the final showdown. They may have a weaving path to get there, but this is kind of the big problem that hopefully I'm going to see them come to the end, and like the fruition of everything's going to be at that. So even, that I will say this game is not how that was planned. And we talked into that, where it's like, I had a couple sessions planned, and it's like, oh, this is going to be a longer thing. And I have let it unveil more, but every session we play has helped me to like formulate a little more. This is what I hope the end resolve of the game will be. So I don't know, like, do you think about that, Matthew, as far as like kind of end point when you're starting to sit down and think campaign?
Yeah. So I think we've talked in past episodes where I very rarely am the onion peeling back guy. I'm the one who thinks, what's this whole thing and where's it going to end? So that always, almost always is part of mine, is where it's going to end starts. But when I'm first sitting down to start a campaign, sometimes it's knowing what do I do to find an exciting story to tell that has an exciting end. So before I even pick, this is the end and how do I get back, it's about spending a good bit of time dreaming for me, is wondering. And of course, I always talk about this, sitting there with journal and pen in hand. I talk about those what ifs all the time, but I actually, for the last two campaigns that I've run, the big ones, there's lots of books you can get, and you can also get them free on Libby, from your library. If you have a library account, and you can check them out, like different ones, but there'll be, writer's prompts, stories. So I got one that was writer's prompts for science fiction and fantasy. Actually, I've got like 6 or 7 of them because there are so many out there. And they'll just be, it's almost like these little daily devotionals where there's like a small little square page and you get like, a tiny little paragraph, and it's just supposed to start you off in your devotion. But this one is, each page will have like a prompt for you to begin writing, is what most of the ones I pick are for. It's people who are writing science fiction and fantasy, and they're just trying to throw out seeds and see. And so I go through them and like sit and think, how could this work? And sometimes I combine multiple of those, and but I'll just go till something inspires me. That could be cool. I remember reading one once about like a world where people could grow a body, but they basically switch their mind between the different bodies they grow, and like the rich are able to do this and the poor are not, and and it was given something like that. But in my mind, I thought, wow, what would that look like if I had a game? Because I always had people talking about wanting to, liking this character, or I really want to play this character. And I thought, what if they could choose two different character types? And what happens is they have to go through a ritual that switches their mind from one body to the other with all of its inherent abilities and growth. But they can only be leveling up one at a time. And, there's restrictions on that. And so that all came from that prompt. I also thought of prompts, again, there are lots and lots of prompts. And I remember one, you find yourself, you wake up on an island and all you know is now you are being hunted by this, really wealthy individual. And I'm like, oh, how could that be? And one of the 9 moons in the Blood of the Kings thing I did, right. That was the whole premise was, so that one wasn't the full campaign. That was like one part of the campaign that I took. But what I'll do is I'll start with these story prompts and I'll just let my mind go. And then I also have mentioned in past podcasts that for me, especially, I will get a huge, on my iPad, it gets overflowed and I have to clear these off. But I'll sit down and download just hundreds and hundreds of incredible environments or inspiring character portraits. So it's all about the art. These environments that just are just like mind bending, or wow, that would be, that place is full of lava. That place is full of ice. That place has this great height component to it, whatever. I just download these pictures that inspire me with all these different incredible environments. And I do the same with just portraits that just grab me because something in them adds a depth. And there's 2 reasons I do that. So I may be from these story starters starting to get an idea of what this campaign can be. But one of my major goals is I want very memorable moments throughout my game. The last thing I want is a game where every time it's like you trek through the woods for a bit and now some orcs or goblins jump out, roll initiative. And so their whole campaign is just kind of it's a trope that happens like all the time. And when you say, hey, remember back to that campaign, they're like, yeah, I think we had a memorable battle in there. It was pretty cool, but everything bleeds together. Well, the way I like to start is with these like incredible environments and thinking, okay, at different points through my campaign, I'm going to move my people to these places. And when they have a battle in that location, I guarantee you it's going to stick in their mind differently than just we were walking through the woods and we got jumped by some orcs. And so I start with those locations, but then I also start with character art. And it may not be anybody I know that has a part yet, but when I look at them, it seems the art is, not these like, I don't know. Again, I'm stay away from the trope, elf and the trope. I just forgot the horns and the tails. What's that? A tiefling and the trope, whatever, the dwarf that got the beard and the tankard in one hand. I stay away from the tropes and I try to look for just very interesting character art. And then I start to imagine, who would that person be? I'm just looking at that picture. Who would that person be and what could they do? And they start to suggest things, and that's good for me and my building, but it's also good because when I show that later, there's something completely different about me showing a character that has a great complexity to it for my players to remember that character than if I just say, all right, you got this guy and he is, he's got a scar on his face and, this and that, and you're describing it. They may, make a good picture in their mind, but you sometimes solidify how real that character is to you. And then that solidifies how real that character is to them. So again, all this is before I even know what parts these are going to play. Right. I start with these prompts. I start with these pictures of places, and I start with these pictures of people, and I let that mix as a stew. I kind of over days. I don't do this all in one day. Over a week, 2 weeks, sometimes I'll sit and I'll just begin putting all these together and thinking, what if this, and I do the what if, and I'll sit with my journal and I'll start to get an idea, and it's going to have this overarching, huge story where I know where it's going to end. But also the way I plan is it's going to have stops along the way. Now, what order my characters get there, what choices they make, that's completely up to them. Right. And again, so at the end of this talk, remind me to talk about what happens when someone decides I'm going to run a pre-made campaign, because that's different But in the kind of campaigns I like to build, I very much like to have open worlds and freedom with an end in mind. And so that stuff will happen. And I just want to, I know I did it again. I'm talking and talking and talking, but I want to point out some stuff that has really been helpful for me and might be helpful for our ascending GMs, those things people out there. So there's two great books that I'm going to, can you read this? Is that for you or is that backwards?
That's right. 45.
I never know if my camera's flipped. Yeah. So there's a book here. This one's by Victoria Schmidt. It's called 45 Master Characters, and this talks about like archetypes of characters, and a lot of them come from like Greek mythology. But it'll talk about all those different types of characters. And this is not the one I necessarily wanted to show you, but it's kind of a couple books I have here. So they'll talk about the whole. First section, or the first main section, is about creating female heroes and villains, and it talks about how you would base them off of Aphrodite, who is the seductive muse and the femme fatale, and point out parts of that, or Artemis, who is the Amazon and the Gorgon, or Athena, who is the father's daughter and the backstabber. These are the archetypes she plays. And so as you're building your characters, you're not going to use these Greek people, but who, is this person the backstabber? Is this person the nurturer and over-controlling mother? Is this person the mystic or the betrayer? And then there's male villains, and it's the same thing. They go through a lot of Greek, and then they talk about supporting characters. That's a good book. Cool. Check it out sometime. You can really kind of jump to the page. But the one I wanted to show you for today is this one. Surprise, surprise. 20 master plots. And this is like, they broke down like every story that's happened like in the world. Okay, maybe they didn't look at everyone in the world, but they look at the big stories that happen. Everything from Grapes of Wrath to Beowulf to whatever. And they break down these story plots. And these are like the 20 master plots that happen no matter what the genre is, if it's science fiction, if it's history, if it's this or it's that. And they break down these plots. And the good thing about this book is they kind of have some introductions, and then they name 20 plots, and they'll give you examples from movies that you've seen or books that you've read. They'll say, this is an example of that plot. Yeah. And then they'll have kind of the main components of that plot. If you're going to run, in this case, this was for writing. And again, I used to have a creative writing minor. I do have a creative writing minor. And this was all for writing, whether it's a novel or short story or whatever. But they would talk about like, these are components you would have if you're going to have this kind of master plot. And here's a checklist. And so some of these master plots, there's the quest. When people go out in search of something. There's the adventure. That's different than a quest, even though they may look a little similar at first. But an adventure plot is different than a quest plot, and they talk about what those differences are. There's the pursuit, where you're after someone, and they talk about what are the things that make this plot what it is, and you can begin to plan that into a game. If you want to have a game where the entire thing centers on this pursuit of a certain person or thing. There's the rescue. And that's a whole different story or a whole different plot. There's the escape. There's the revenge, the riddle, the rivalry. And again, I could go through all of these, and maybe I'll just finish out here. There's the underdog, where your characters would be considered the underdogs, and this situation comes up, and can they surmount? Can they overcome? There's the temptation. There's the metamorphosis, the transformation, the maturation, and on and on. But again, one of the things that is so great about this book is at the end of each chapter, they have like a checklist. So if we are, say, in the quest, some things you're going to have in a quest plot is that it's about a search for a person, place, or thing. Okay, there's a close parallel between your protagonist's intent and motivation. Your plot should move around a lot. So in a quest, you don't stay in one place the whole time. In a quest, you move from place to place, visiting many people and places. So when you're thinking of building your campaign, you're like, if this is a quest plot, I better think about what my continents and what what towns, what people. You're going to be thinking, this is one that moves around a lot, and it goes on and lists other things. Let's look at, just real quick, the checklist here for, what is this one? This is adventure. In the adventure, the focus is on the journey more than the person making the journey. Okay, so it's going to be about them, but a big part of an adventure part is what happens along the way, what happens in that journey. It considers a foray into the world, to new and strange places. So again, this one's going to have lots of places. And again, adventure and quest in a lot of people's minds get mixed up, but they'll have several other things on that checklist. Let's do one more here real quick. Again, not trying to take up a ton of time, but just to give you a flavor. The escape. Escape is always literal. If you design one that's about escape, it should be literal. Your hero should be confined against their will, often unjustly, and wants to escape. 2, the moral argument of your plot should be black and white. 3, your hero should be the victim, as opposed to in the rescue plot where the victim is saved. Number 4, your first dramatic phase deals with the imprisonment and any initial attempts of escape that fail. Your second dramatic phase will deal with the hero's plans for escape, and the plans are almost always thwarted in the beginning. 6, your dramatic phase deals, the third dramatic phase deals with the actual escape, and then 7, the antagonist finally has control during the first 2. So if again, this would be weird if you said, okay, I'm going to have you in jail and you spend the whole first phase like being unjustly imprisoned and making plans. That would not be very exciting. So if you're thinking, I'm going to have this in a campaign and it's going to be a party, maybe there's a section of the world that's walled off because of some huge threat and nobody is allowed outside these walls. And so at first, your party's whole thing is about like, we find out we might need to get outside these walls, but they are super heavy guarded and there's lots of, things. So that does become this, how do we get out of here? How do we make our plan? And I think it's totally normal in a campaign to have them make a few attempts that are thwarted. That makes it more exciting to get beyond there. And then there's the actual attempt that works. And then there's what do you find beyond? And then it might morph into a different kind of campaign. But again, starting with these master plots that have been in every book and story you've ever heard, growing up, whether it's reading or movie watching, and thinking, how can I do a campaign that's in the model of this master plot? That's a great way to start, and it can give you a lot of inspiration. And so, again, I didn't mean to talk for hours on those, but I think it's always good to point out things that can help people begin to get ideas. And so 20 Master Plots, this one's by Ronald Tobias. 20 Master Plots and how to build them. Great way to start. So often when I get to that third stage, I start with the story prompts. Maybe I start with a bunch of pictures of places and people. And then I think, what's my overarching plot? And that's where I'll use something like that. Is this a prophecy that they're fulfilling? Is this a mystery that they have to solve? Is this an adventure or looking for a great treasure? And that's the whole thing. Is this a rescue? Is this, whatever it is, I go to that section and I look for those stories there. There's more, but I want to give you a chance to talk.
Yeah, no, that's really good. Yeah, I think those are, we'll have to share those too so people can see. Is that from the same series?
I don't know. I bought these books back when we had, brick and mortar bookstores all over the place. And these two were beside each other on the shelf.
They feel the same.
And I was in creative writing. They looked very similar. So I'm assuming they were part of a set, and I didn't see any more. So
I'll have to check those
they're
out.
Different authors, but
I think looking through that list or lists like that is like extremely helpful, whether it's kicking off a campaign or, kind of getting ahead of myself here, but like an arc shift even, or I mean, honestly, any of these sizes of planning, even like a session, it's like, this could be a rescue session. This could be some of them may be a little bit broader than one session, but I think that's really interesting, especially maybe I think at times, maybe we get into a point in a game where it's like, things are feeling a little dry, or maybe I've lost my way a little bit on like what I was aiming toward. And even like looking through that mid session and being like, maybe this could be turned in this direction of a rescue, or now the quest is being given kind of thing, or something like that. I think that's really good. I had written down another one of my questions that I'm like asking myself is like, what themes do I want to take part in this? And I think that plays a lot. That's kind of a more generalized way of like, you're giving some good specifics there. But that's the thing I want to like ask through is like, are there actual like themes of, and I think those answer those like of rescue, of quest, of prophecy, of that kind of thing. So sitting down with the list.
Those things in the one on character, building characters, those deal with the themes of people, and those are kind of intimately entwined with what you're going to be doing as your overall story the master
Yeah.
archetype story.
Right.
There's these ideas of transformation or of what's going to happen with your characters, and those themes are going to wind in as
Absolutely.
well.
Yeah,
And
that's
we
a
talk
good.
about all of this, like some things might happen for a session or some things might happen for an arc. But I think overall, you should have an idea what is the entirety of the story. And again, we're talking about campaigns today. We're going to talk more about arcs and about sessions.
Yeah.
But I think this one hugely important part when you're sitting down to start your campaign, to put all this stuff in, and then remember that you don't have to come up with it in a day or 3 days. There needs to be growth. Your brain will make all kinds of connections based on the things you're seeing, the things you're doing, and the things you're putting in constantly over a week or so. But don't forget, and I tell my students this all the time, and I believe this so much for myself. It doesn't matter how much you read, doesn't matter how much you've heard from somebody else, how much you hear from us here on Rise of the GM. It's the time of reflection that really begins to open new stuff for you. And it's the same way with building. You're going to put in a lot of raw material. You're going to put in a lot of thoughts and possibilities and what ifs. But it's that reflection time that you need to allow your brain time to reflect on that. It very much is this idea of the idea grows, right? It's like a living organism. You don't just stamp, I love this one, I'm going to do this master plot.
Right.
Bam. You have to let all of that begin to grow and become something in your mind that you as a GM are excited to partake in and tell as well.
For sure. Yeah. I think it's having that ability to ruminate on things. I feel like even outside of like the changes that players make or the decisions they make that shifts story, there are those moments where I'll like kind of do a longer term. This is kind of the hope, like for what I'm aiming toward. And we'll come back later and be like, oh, like this is how that actually has changed in my brain. And here's a better idea. I think that time, like you said, to reflect and think on that. The kind of lost my train of thought.
Your train, get it? There's that train in the background again for Adam. While you're gaining your train, I had something you just reminded me of I was going to say. And then I started talking about your train of thought and I might have lost it. Oh, yeah, it's this. So guys, you know how some of us, we have like weird brains that get involved in other things. Lately, my brain has been very interested in reading a lot and thinking a lot about quantum mechanics and about higher dimensions. You may be saying, what the heck? This is called Rise of the GM, not that. But one of the major thoughts is as you get into higher dimensions, they're not dimensions of physical space, they're dimensions of probability. And that, in the fifth dimension, you're looking at all the possible probabilities of that can happen in a life. And in the sixth dimension, you can actually fold that probability space and move between probabilities. All that you don't have to know. But what you do have to know is they talk about our lives. And you guys have kind of thought this idea probably at some point in your life that you go through life. And this is the many worlds idea that comes in quantum mechanics, that I make a choice. And based on that choice, there's two different versions of the multiverse that could go off. You guys have all heard this, right, in your Marvel comics and such. And there's infinite universes because there's infinite choices, and there's one for every choice that you could make. That probability goes out somewhere. Now, some people don't believe in the many worlds. They believe that those probabilities are all possible, but that then our observation or our actual, that those collapse. Anyway, not going to bore you with that. What they do say, though, is possibility in our life comes from three places. It comes from choice, it comes from chance, and it comes from other people. And so every time you're looking at quantum, probabilities, you're looking at choices you make. You're looking at chance things that happen. And this is the whole, a butterfly flaps its wings and, Thailand, and there's a hurricane somewhere.
Yeah,
I don't remember the exact analogy there, but it's that idea that because of chance things that happen, and then that just makes something happen here and now. And then the other one is other people. having influence in the world as well. You don't just, you're not God and you don't make all the choices, and therefore the universe goes only according to your choices. Sometimes things happen differently and probabilities collapse because of what other people decide. So you got your choice, you got chance, and you got other people. I love to think of that in terms of RPG,
Yeah.
that the choices your characters make, the chances of certain things happening, that's the dice, and that's, how, things end up. And then of course other people in the campaign coming in with designs of their own, or you could look at that, your choice, and then other people being the players and their choices. However you look at that, these things are all going to shape the way your campaign's going to go. But you know that there's a beginning point and an ending point. In physics, they call that the alpha spot and the omega spot, right? Where the universe started, they think of where the universe will end. Anyway, all of that to say,
Yeah.
I do believe you should have an overarching campaign, but you have to allow for choice, chance, and other people all
Yeah.
throughout, while still knowing you can end up near the same place or at the same place. But that whole idea of the growing seed of your story as a GM, and I know, again, I'm going to talk later about like, what do you do if you pick up a book that's a campaign and you run through that? That's different. But as a GM, the way I typically GM, I allow myself to change based on character choices and on
Right.
chance and on other people. And so sometimes the end, and we've alluded to this earlier, the end is going to be the same place that I initially thought, but it may look completely different. Different players doing different things at this end. And that's happening in our current campaign right now. I got partway through, and I absolutely know where this is kind of going to end, but halfway through, things are happening in this this Dormant Mind campaign that I am super excited about how this is going to end, and just the twist and the rug pulled out from under my characters. Spoiler alerts.
Great.
Just the way things are going to happen at the end that they're not going to expect, and just the surprise and the accomplishment, and like the way that's going to come out. But that changed greatly because of choices they made, and because of that idea that I had in my head still growing. It's a living organism. It doesn't stop at campaign planning and then now we've rolled the dice the first time, this is set in stone. That's not the way it is. This is evolving as I go. And that's the beauty of the group storytelling together, is they're helping you. You're all telling this great story together. And sometimes what happens in the midst of it and where your mind goes, it goes to a place that was even better than you ever thought of when you started.
Yeah. I think the encouragement there for you listening, if you're running campaigns or thinking about running campaigns, I think is to allow yourself that flexibility, to do that. Like, it's okay for things to shift. It's okay to hold that loosely and let things change depending on those things that were interacted with and how the story can shift. Yeah, for sure. I think there's a couple things you said, Matthew, about like the players, and even earlier you used the word transformation, and that's like a question, I'm asking, and I don't think you can like stranglehold this for people at all. You shouldn't, but like asking that question of like where or what kind of growth do I hope to see in characters? I think it's still like a worthy question in that too.
It's a great question.
Like how, and again, that's a lot of that's going to be based on their decisions, but throughout a campaign, like, do I want to see the person who never trusts anybody? Like, and again, I can't make that decision for them, but I want to do I put things in their path intentionally to give them a chance to trust, or to stick with, I don't trust people, or the person who doesn't respect people unless they pull their own weight. Well, like, what can I throw in the way? And those things are kind of a little more micro moments in the game, but I think they build up. So that's a question I ask a lot when trying to get people's character, or like for me as a GM understanding their characters, of like, okay, this is like maybe a vice that they have, or a more negative personality trait, or maybe a positive one that they can lean into. How are they going to grow through these things? And I think that's part of the whole journey thing that we've talked about before too, of whether it's a personal journey or it's the locational journey. How are they going? So that's a question, I ask, and I think you had spoken into, but one more piece for me is
real quick before you move on for that, hold that. In that transformation idea, I think it's great. You throw stuff out there for them to make choices, and you're going to have some players who pick up on that and play into it, and it becomes as much a story as the rest of the story in their life, and some are not. You're going to throw out opportunity after opportunity, and they're just going to be like, nope, I do this. That's the way my character is. It's going to be a little harder. But think about not just transforming from I don't trust people to I trust people. But as the GM, can you even get more complicated and bring somebody to a place of trust and then betray them? Bring them to a place of no trust, and then see if you can once again put something in their mind where they have to trust, and maybe it turns a little sour, and then the very end is the ultimate test. Yeah. At the very end, you have to trust somebody or not trust somebody. What do they do? And you just see where that goes. That's kind of mean, right? That's playing down. Go on with what was your other point?
There's some things there. I was thinking about something that was in our last post, and I've forgotten.
I've got to quit interrupting you.
Oh, no, you're fine. You're fine. Because I want to bounce the ideas, but there was a question about who, this is totally going off of what we're talking about, but who will be important for the players to talk to in the session is what I was talking about. And the thing was this could be related to the larger narrative or to their personal story. Both of those things are equally important in that moment, and that just, what you said there just made me think of that, of those are both, I want to remember that as a GM as my overarching campaign story that I'm hoping for and moving towards is important to me. But not forgetting that their stories that they're forming and changing, and their characters are going through, not to lose those for the sake of the arc, kind of thing. Those are super important too. And that's a thing, looking back, I feel like I've gotten better as I've ran things, of being more intentional about those things. First game was this is the arc. I'm doing some stuff, but it's going to have to be pretty intentional on the players' parts to make it happen. And learning as time goes on, those player stories are so important, and I want to give time into those too, kind of things. So that just came up from what you said. But going to what my kind of final thoughts were, thinking about the world, and we are going to do world building conversations coming up too. So I don't want to get too far into that, but thinking about what kind of world is this that this campaign is taking place in. In the game, the Jade Masks game I'm running now, it's a world it's actually the same world as that first campaign I ever ran, and it's in a different location. And that was a decision there too of, okay, where is this going to be set? Because I knew this is a bunch of people, the players are in a thieves guild in a big city. That's what we started with, kind of thing. And they're going to do some jobs. And then it was okay, this is going to become a bigger thing. It's a harbor city. Okay, I think this would be really awesome to put into this already formed world that I have. I have some history in my brain from it, but I don't want to put it directly into where the other campaign was. I want there to be some distance for reasons. And that's the thing I kind of was working through as far as where is this campaign? I think that's a really important question for us to ask, and not just have general, oh, you just start, but where and why is it located where it is? And then also the range, and I've kind of joked, I keep thinking I'm just going to make this an urban gritty game. They're going to be in the alleyways and the sewers and the buildings and never leave the city. And then it's you end up globe trotting again, kind of thing. And, but even trying to think through the range of okay, how much travel, how much quest is there? How much is there going to be we are pursuing someone to try to get them to rescue them, to do those kind of things from those plots. So like I try to think in terms of that with the world too, of knowing that with impending doom, one of the campaigns I ran, I knew that there was an ancient dragon that had been bound and was probably going to come back at the end. Like that was kind of the showdown, you know, at the end. But for the breadth of it, I was like, I really like the idea of all the game taking place in this like pretty large, but this valley. There's this valley land that is kind of cut off from the rest of the world. So you guys were like in the city there, and you had went up kind of in the mountains that surrounded it, and there was like a plains, like a Great Plains kind of area that you had went into, but it wasn't like this expansive world or even planar kind of thing. It was kind of focused there. Whereas as this one's like went on, it's going to be seen quite a bit of the world is what it seems like, kind of thing. So those are things I want to think through in the campaign and kind of know, again, somebody may be like, the party may be like, hey, we're jumping through this portal. And okay, well, you're on the elemental plane of air now. And like, that's where we're at. And because you made that decision, but I like to kind of know that at least of like, okay, are they ever going to be on the other side of the world? Probably not unless they make that decision. So I can kind of focus a little more on the story here with that. So that's been important to me, I think, as things have been planned out for campaigns.
Yeah, absolutely. I think in my last campaign, I knew it was going to involve 7 different kingdoms, the kingdoms of old, and it was going to be pretty globe-trotting. And so I had to plan out 2 continents and what's the lore of each one, where are things going to happen, and how are they going to end up in these different places. Right. Very different than if you're like, hey, they're going to start in a city and they're going to stay in the city, and maybe they'll go to the next city and that's it. Yeah, but that's part of your planning.
Right.
I mentioned earlier there's a little bit that is different. And so we've actually had somebody ask us, hey, what do you guys do when it's more like somebody just getting started as a GM? What do you think about them just picking up a campaign that's already written? When you do that, it's all this stuff that we're talking about is a little different because you're not creating this and you're not really deviating from this. I found one thing when you do a written campaign is it's really good for getting you in the habit of knowing, how do I run a game? How do I deal with skill rolls? How do I deal with, options and traps and all the stuff that you may not be familiar with when you're first starting DM? So it's great. The hard part is it's a little more hemmed in. The campaign goes through here, through here, through here, through here, and then you get to the end. And you're basically running people through something that's written, and it has like some choices in it, but really you're going. You're kind of on the rails and heading. And those kinds of things, I don't want to dismiss those and act like those are no good, because I do think when you're starting, whether you decide to do a whole campaign, it's an undertaking, or you decide to start with a module or an encounter, and then as you begin to get your feet under you, you let some after that branch out and go where it goes.
Right.
When you do a campaign, the hardest part, I think, in doing a campaign is when, and we'll talk about this a little more with an arc and session as far as including modules, because I will often like take a module and like totally rip parts out and adapt it for some places because it inspires some good ideas on my way through my campaign journey. But the hardest part about any of these things is having a feel for where everything is going. And so I know even when I'm just looking at a module, sometimes, man, I have to read that thing closely, like over several times in order to understand, here's the places they're going, here's all the people they're going to meet, and here's how it's going to end up, and here's where these clues come from. And my brain can feel like a total whirlwind as I'm trying to understand that. And you multiply that to a campaign, you probably don't even do that. You don't read the whole book and totally remember how it all connects. You may read the book before you start the campaign and know where it's going to end, but you're having to kind of follow along as you go, and that can be harder. And it's a double-bladed sword. My feeling on written modules and campaigns, I feel like they're great for helping you get the training wheels and know how it works. I feel like they're great when you're using them and inserting them in your own campaign, just parts here and there, but you are going to have to insert some effort, put in some effort in order to understand everything about that before you start running it. And it can leave you in a whirlwind. I forgot what my third thing was. I believe they're good in those aspects, but I believe they can hinder you a little bit in your creative progress. And what I would say is do it as long as you feel like it's necessary. And if you really feel like I've always wanted to run this, whatever this campaign is, and I know that there used to be what's called Dragon magazines where they would do an installment like every month. And you'd get it and read over it, and you didn't have another section for a whole month. And so you would just read over it and kind of make that go where it goes. And that can be, that used to be helpful. Now they just do it in books and modules. Right. I don't know. But my feeling, and this is just a personal opinion, is I think do those until you feel comfortable and then start to allow yourself to wander into the wide world of what if and imagination, and everything's open. But always look at campaigns and modules and stuff like that for inspiration, and don't feel bad about ripping out parts whole cloth and shoving them in your campaign if you can make it fit. Right. That's what they're for. And, don't feel a bit bad about that. And if you go off and do entirely your own thing, also fine. So I guess what I'm saying is do any of the three, the whole thing written, do the combination, or do your whole own thing, but don't limit yourself just because you feel like I can only do what's been published. Mm-hmm. That's just not so. But those published things can be a great help. So all that to say, this whole campaign planning talk we're doing here is going to be completely different if you're saying, I'm going to run this published campaign, because you're not doing that. You're not thinking, who's my bad guy? Where are the places they're going to go? How's the main parts of this? Oh, now I'm following what happens with the choices, chances, and other people, and letting this spark off, because you really got to kind of stick to this campaign. So the campaign planning process, if you're doing a written campaign, your campaign planning, that's hard for me to say, is going to be reading that thing front to back. Yeah. Maybe reading it again. Right. And really kind of getting in your mind, these are the major movements, and I'm going to explore each one closer as I get there, but I just want to know the major story. And that's going to be your campaign planning, and you're going to start, and it's going to help you. It's going to hold your hand real close as you move through learning how to become a GM. And I don't want to make it sound like that's a bad thing, because that's a good thing for sure. For all of us. Mm-hmm. But then allow yourself to come to a place where you're like, okay, now I'm going to slip over where the Rise of the GM people have been. And that is this whole creation and co-creation aspect of campaign planning. So I just wanted to throw that out there, because I know that a lot of people start with a campaign. They'll read something, they'll be like, man, I really want to run something. That's what I'm going to run. And they'll get it. And it is more reading and understanding where you're going, and all this stuff that we're talking about. You may be saying, man, that doesn't make any sense at all for what I'm doing. That's okay. These are different stages of a GM life, and you'll go through probably all of them if you continue as a GM.
Absolutely.
You had some other questions in this that I wanted to touch on, and one of the questions I think that was in the kind of the topic as we were starting it is, where does it start? How much do you have planned to start?
Yeah. I think like some of those questions, just kind of thinking through that of like, where's the point where like I'm ready to go, kind of thing of. How much have I planned when I'm like, hey, let's get together for, session 0, or like we're jumping in this thing. How much do you feel like you need to have ready, I guess, at that point?
So I'm going to go with the caveat that I typically spend a month as I'm creating, again, because I believe there needs to be time for the stew to simmer and for things to grow, the mold to grow inside the stew that becomes the germ of the idea. And my stew is so good. But anyway, I allow, I try to give myself a summer month, as I know I'm going to start running a campaign soon. I give myself time, because I don't do the peel the onion back. I love to have an idea of where it's going and have like some amazing things that I can move around into whatever choices they make and get them to places.
Sure.
With all that said, as I sit down to actually start the campaign, we're getting to the night when I'm going to start. I want to have, okay, so for the first session, typically there's a lot of how does rapport build? How do I get them together? And, that's a whole topic in itself. But I will plan the first several encounters. So I'm talking like two or three encounters. And when I say encounters, there's going to be social encounters of how they get to know each other and what that all looks like. There's going to be the main kind of like what sets this up as an impetus. What makes this important with a time limit on it. Why are they doing anything? The thing that gets them moving as an adventure party. Typically it starts with a battle or a social interaction, and I need to have that planned out, and I need to have maybe the battle after that. At that point, I'm going to have some options, and maybe that first night I'll have options of if they get through this first thing and they get to this second thing. Typically I'll kind of run them through two things that they're going to get to, and at that point there's going to start being choices. Right. And I'm going to know in my mind these are the three likely choices they're going to make, and I'm going to have a basic plan. I may not have it completely planned out, but I'm going to know this is a place they can go, this is a place they can go, and this is a place they can go, right, so that I can tease and cliffhang for, when my next session comes up, which actually those things I do in that first, maybe the first two sessions. Typically I end up planning more thinking they're going to get through stuff faster, and then it goes slower, and I can work those out in coming weeks. But I will start with a social encounter and a battle encounter that I know are going to happen, and I'll plan my branches. So that's the way I start. I have to have that much at least planned. And of course, that's knowing kind of the overarching concept of eventually they're going to move from here to here to here to here, or in some other order, they're going to get to these places. Mm-hmm. So I try to stay 2 or 3 choices ahead of my party. That there are times where they choose something completely different than I would have. And we've talked before about how you don't have to scrap a whole arm that you had. Sometimes you can retool that. They don't know that was there. And you're like, this is something they need to get to, but they choose to go, talk to this guy, and you're okay, well, they're going to talk to that guy, and then this thing's going to be right there. Instead, you can do that. But when I sit down to start, the night we start, I have their meeting, the impetus, the battle or whatever that gets them going. And then I try to have a couple choices beyond that just in mind.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think that's very similar. One of the things I like to have going into a game is like, I don't know a better word, but like current events. I have like a little list of that I like to be happening. So things going on in the background that maybe they're not even experiencing at the time, but they're going to, because that's another, lately that's been happening more for me in games where I want there to be in my brain, at least, the world changing. And so when they come, there are moments where the party comes and it's like, oh, there was a power shift here. Someone else is now the mayor, or like, that those kind of, or we brought up that, even the one time you guys passed through the Aarakocra village and on your way back, it was deserted because the attacks had kept happening and they were either killed or driven off, things like that different. And so I like to have a rolling current events kind of list in my planning document that I use. So to start a game, it may be, some other person has put themselves forward as like an heir to the kingdom. That may be a thing that's happening. And it's like, this may not affect these peons from the country, kind of thing but one day when they get to the capital, that may actually be a thing, or there is a cult that's growing in power and influence in the world, or there's a disease that's broken out in the West, like that, those kind of things. And knowing some of those kind of things, just to like flesh out the world a little more. That can be stuff where it's like, okay, you're in the tavern or you're meeting people on the road and there are rumors are being shared around the campfire or that kind of thing. Maybe that just makes the world feel a little more, but also just those are for me more hooks that maybe help the party to grab onto something like, we really like that. I want to go check out this disease feels unnatural. Why don't we go into the West and figure out how that connects to this other stuff that we're doing? So I like to have that to just start out with, have a handful of things that are like, this is a big world situation. You know, there's war in the North. So that leads to maybe there's refugees coming in, or maybe they're going to get conscripted to go to the war, or, you know, those kind of things. So that's a cool part for me. But I agree with you of like kind of having those building blocks in place, and then keeping ahead is plenty, you know, and coming into those for sure.
Yeah, that idea of foreshadowing, making it so that when you actually get to a bigger part of the story, it has more weight because you've already been hearing about stuff. That's great. And you kind of mentioned something. You said, "Oh, you know, somebody put themselves forward as heir to the throne, and you may not, you know, being the kind of backwoods people you are, you may not encounter that until you get to the city, whatever." This brings up for me, where do you start? And for me, almost always, and it probably has to do with my internal narrative from all the books I've read. It's always in a small town or on a dirt road, or because you think back to Oracle of Order. You guys all had a dream and you converged on this place on a dirt road, crossroads, where there's this sage sitting cross-legged who gives you this prophecy. That's right. And then that propels you forward. But where did you meet? You were just on a dirt road. That's nowhere. This last one, you guys met in this little town of Cotswold because of, you know, you're trying to help a friend, and some other people are part of the militia. They come down because they have to hear it. But then from that, a whole bigger thing kicks off and takes off. I typically am always going to be that, you know, we start from very meager, mundane, you know, the overlooked, and we become like major players in the world, you know, because that's the stories I read. The boy who was nothing and everyone overlooked him. He didn't even have magic. And then suddenly he finds out his magic is the strongest magic ever. And he is now, you know, between all these political powers and this armies and the world's at war, and he's right in the thick of it. That's generally my progression. And it made me think, as I was thinking of that before this podcast, have I ever tried to do it another way? Maybe ever. And part of this has to do with you guys all pick characters, or your player characters all pick characters that are of such different social status and whatever. But they're also all low level. They're all first level people. And so it's easy to start in a place that's small, and then the world grows as they grow. But what would it look like if everybody started off in the castle? You were all members of like the castle, and you were around in the very central of whatever big is happening in the world as you're, you know, first level and beginning to level up. What would that look like? I don't know, because I haven't run those. And maybe that's a thought exercise, a thought experiment I can begin to run is, how could I start people at a different place than like the overlooked tiny dot on the map that no one ever notices if you weren't from there? Because that's always where my characters start. What if they started right in the middle of it all?
Yeah, right.
Who knows?
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, so that's some thoughts. That's some thoughts on campaign starter. Any final parting shots, Matthew, for that before we move on?
Campaign starting is one of my most favorite parts, because I love the sitting and imagine. And it probably goes back to like my creative writing. There's that control of the author where you're like spinning yarns and able to like make it whatever. But I also love the changing that happens throughout. So we'll get to the next week. We're going to get to how do you plan an arc, and how do you enact that, and then how do you plan a session. So come back for those, because those are going to be good. But let's move on today to our masks. We always throw out an NPC. Sorry, we have another girl for you. Another girl NPC. So you have to deal with that. This is the Jaded Nepotist. And I'm going to read this, and then we can talk about how you might use this Jaded Nepotist. So we got this beanpole of a woman with wide set, fishy eyes, sharp features. Marla isn't much to look at. This is Marla Eretz. She isn't much to look at. She often wears tight gowns that emphasize her androgynous figure. So you can see this one's a little different. This is not the seductive person we've had so often. This is like a, you know, totally not, you know, wide set fish eyes and a beanpole and androgynous, whatever. Marla fancies herself a vamp. Fancies herself. I don't think everybody else does. She isn't particularly about who she cuddles up to. spurning her affections or refusing proffered advice that she kind of offers will send Marla into a tantrum, right? So though she readily indulges her every whim, old experiences hold little excitement for Marla. She's always looking for something new. What's the next thing she can experience? Marla is petty. She's childish. She wants to grab and play with any new toy that she sees, including people, right? And she wants to always get her way. You can sense there's a spoiledness to this person. And actually, background, spoiled rotten by her rich and influential parents. Marla was handed everything on a silver platter from birth. She eventually became such a nuisance that she was given a position in charge of the city guard just to get her out from underfoot. Bad choice, right? Proved to be an enormous mistake. She immediately began abusing her position, using the guard as her personal goon squad and turning the headquarters into a private hedonist playground, which is not what the city guard's supposed to be. There's a chance that she just wants acceptance, understanding, and the love of her parents, but if so, that's buried so far down that no one ever sees it, not even Marla. I struggled with this one. I don't know how I would put this person into a campaign. I'm sure there's a way. If I sat and thought about it, I tried to sit and think about it as I was reading this, and I'm like, man, I just don't know where I would put her. Adam, I'm going to defer to you. Where would you put her in a campaign? You're like, I don't know.
I want Marla to become completely infatuated with one of the characters.
Oh my!
And never leave them alone. Like that. That's what I think I want to do.
And she's got the whole force of the city guard goon squad behind her.
Yeah. So there's like an authority that she can keep. Like, all the guards show up and they're like, hey, Leonis, you have to come with us today because you're wanted in the thing. And okay. And so, you're brought in there and then she's just there wanting to like spend time with you, kind of thing. And it's like, I have things to do. And, it's not one of those things where it's like, oh, I'm going to pull out my sword and fight these people over this. I don't think, kind of thing. But
and doubtful they're going to pull out their swords and cut you down.
Listen here, friend. Josh said, listen here, friend, because
Josh is Leonis in our campaign right now.
Yeah. So I like that. But not just for, the thing I think I would want to take it farther is it's not just for the comedy of the thing, because there is like a meta comedy in those kind of situations where it's like, I love that this person drives you insane. Like that's funny. But that can only go so far, and I think that maybe, so what is the end game there? If I'm going to like make this person completely infatuated with one of these characters, where does that lead? Is it a story about redemption or a person like transformation in a person? Is it a story about I don't know, kind of thing? Is it just putting a hurdle in front of a players for them to figure out how to get through, kind of thing? So that's the thing. I think I'm not quite sure. I would want it to go farther.
You could put her parents as an important part of the, they're rich and they've kind of did this to get her off from underfoot. They know she's annoying, but you have to interact with them and she's infatuated with one of your characters. And that may not benefit you in dealing with them. And how do you deal with it? Yeah. Who knows?
Yeah. I think there could be, and I know it's not, we don't want to make these just all about like, what's the encounter that comes from this, but we have made a mess of this and we need something to change. Please help us. That's another, this isn't
asking
about
her.
like asking the player, the characters, okay, like this is the city coming to the characters and being like, we made a mistake.
The parents?
Yeah.
Okay.
And how do you deal with that when, again, this isn't a like, oh, we're going to just go and murder hobo this poor woman who may be a jerk, but like, that's not the fix to this, I don't think. So how do you do that as a party, and win back the guards, like their influence, and kind of thing. So I think that could be a thing, but I definitely want her to get just super infatuated with one of the players so that they have to deal with that constantly. You just imagine letters and magical like missives and the sending spell constantly just interacting with one of your players because she's just trying to talk to them. Yeah, I love
And
it.
she's less than 44% attractive.
Yeah,
Fishy eyes, beanpole.
I was gonna say because I'm reading this. It's been a bit, and it's like if this woman ends up being another one of these like seductive enchantresses, I'm just gonna give up on picking people because I don't know what's going on here. But so it's good that that's not the case.
So I want to throw something out there. I said the 44% attractive in one of my campaigns. I just kind of off the cuff decided that when they met these female NPCs, that we would just roll a D100 to talk about how attractive they were, because one of the barkeeps kind of took a shine to Adam's character. When he liked another person. Anyway, so much drama. But anyway, we rolled in. She was 44% attractive, and she became remembered as Cassandra, the 44% attractive barmaid who was constantly chasing after
She
Adam.
was, yeah. She was one of those too, yeah.
Even though he was interested in somebody else.
Yep.
Oh my. Well, let's jump to our haversack and see what kinds of questions rolled in this week as we reach in to find what floats to the top of the question haversack.
Yep, we have 3 different questions this week. We had one from Wataya Hotel and then a couple from Evan Bright. And so with the Wataya Hotel haversack question, No Way Home. Sticking with our movie titles with this. It says, Dear Matthew and Adam, my question this week is simple. How do you feel about confirming critical roles? I'm very new to this idea, so I may be misunderstanding it, but to me it seems like it might take away from the excitement or success of a player. However, I can also see where it balances out an abundance of luck. What are your thoughts? And do you use critical confirmation in your own games? Thanks for the great show and the great work. Sincerely, Wataya Hotel 98. So critical hits, and the big question is like confirming. Do we do that in our own games? What do we think about that?
So in 3.5 and in Pathfinder, they both have the rule that you confirm criticals. So the rule is, you roll a perfect 20, that's a critical hit, but you have to at least hit them. So you roll again to see if you would hit over their armor class to see if that was actually confirmed. In 5e, that's not a rule anymore.
Right.
Now it is, you roll a 20, it's automatically confirmed and you roll the extra damage. I prefer 5e, which is rare because most of the time I would always fall back to loving Pathfinder rules better. I liked the more complication and all that kind of stuff. But in the critical roles, I'm not against lucky streaks. If a character gets lucky, man, what a story. What a story that is. The day I rolled, six crits in one battle or whatever. And I do think that there are cases where their AC is so high that there's never going to be a confirmation. They can roll that 20 all they want, but then trying to confirm that, unless they roll another 20, I guess might confirm it. But I like the 5e version. I like it. I don't like having to have that extra step in there. And I'm sure at some point I understood like the kind of the logic of how that would turn into, how that would happen in the game. But I like it when it's a confirmed crit or a confirmed crit fail. It's like they roll the one, it's automatically a crit fail and something's going to happen. I like that. That's the way I handle it now that 5e's come along and kind of lifted that rule from me. When I was in Pathfinder, I would do the confirmation roll just because I felt like, I shouldn't just get rid of that because I want to. And lo and behold, D&D comes along and says, hey, we're doing it. You can do it too. And so I do. I like just the confirmation not being necessary, that it's a critical and you go from there.
Yeah. I think for the most part, I land what you're saying, Matthew, is just enjoying that. And like I talked about that game we played on campus on Monday. Like we played Pathfinder 1, but that is the role, the house role there is like, if you roll a 20, it's a, crit. And there's, which I think is fun. And the biggest thing for me, I think there is the excitement of the thing. Cause it always stinks when you're like, I rolled a nat 20. Yes. Awesome. And then you roll like a 1 on your confirmation and it's like, so I hit, and there, I think there's a deflation there. And there's just like a thing that I think one of the things I like most about like 5e specifically is the speed of the game. It is faster because of the simplicity, because it's been simplified. And even those rolls, I mean, criticals aren't like every time you roll, but if you start adding up those extra rolls and like working through that, that is a slower combat. It eventually adds up to that kind of thing. So I do like the speed of it. There is like, one defense of maybe I would give for the confirmation. Well, I don't know if it's a defense, but an idea for that is there are some like builds in the older systems where like I am building so that I never get criticaled, kind of thing. Or like I have, I'm trying to remember what the name of that was. There was like armors you could get that like specifically are like you're going to have way less of a chance of getting a critical hit because it's just that more fortification. I think it's something about fortified or that kind of thing. So like there is an aspect of did that take that does take a little bit of that customization out of your character if that's the direction you want to go. But I also wonder, I have a feeling they have people researching when they make these decisions, how many people are taking the fortification armor when they could take armor of destruction plus 10, kind of thing. I think they're, so I wonder if that's a thing of maybe people weren't actually making that choice, but I think like consistency is important. What you go with is players and, enemies both deal with the same thing. So if you're rolling that 20, it's a critical. That's awesome for players rolling the critical, but that's also your enemy who just rolled a 20 also just criticaled your player, kind of thing. Whereas maybe I'd like to know the history of that, because if that changed, I don't know, like older, like AD&D or 2E or anything like that. Like when did that come into play? I think would be interesting to know, because those I've always heard about being a lot more deadly, and like you're fighting goblins in the mud and you're probably not coming back, kind of thing. Whereas it feels a little more heroic now. And I wonder about some of those old like critical confirmation rules. If that was even like we're going to try to help people survive a little better by, yeah, you got hit by a 20, but maybe it doesn't double damage on you because you managed to get away from that. But so I'm kind of both, but I definitely lean, like, I think if I ran Pathfinder, I'm running 5e right now. If I ran a Pathfinder game, I probably would house rule, no confirmation. Let's just keep it moving, kind of thing. There's a secondary piece that's not part of this question that I wouldn't mind tossing in of what you think, Matthew, with this. Of there is the question, and I think it's actually stated. I haven't checked my sources here. I've heard like these back and forth things. So for a very long time, for me, it was now I got to roll myself back now. I played it several times where you roll a 20. This is not confirmation of criticals. This is just the straight way, the 5e way. You roll a 20, it's a crit. There also is the thought process of you roll a 20, it's a natural 20, but does it still overcome their AC? If it doesn't, kind of thing. And you know what I'm saying there, of like, do you honor the natural 20 and say, because that was the thing we always would say is like, well, I'm a level 1 guy going up against an ancient red dragon, but you can always roll a 20, kind of thing. What do you think about that? Like, does it need to confirm if it's a natural in your brain? I have my own thoughts on that, but
My thoughts are, yes, it is a critical, does not need confirmed.
Yeah.
This is, you're going against a red dragon, you fly in there like an idiot, you're most likely going to die, but somehow your sword goes right underneath a scale, right up into like the soft spot between scales. Highly improbable, most likely not going to happen, but you did it.
Right.
and you damage that thing. And so there you go. But you can stand in there all day and keep hacking at it, and you may never do it again while it sits there, rains fire on you and bites the top of your body in half or whatever. But at least this one time. Yeah. So I would still let that be a critical. If there was ever something you go against that just there was no way to critical it and no way. I mean, if their armor was that high that a 20 would never even hit it, they're basically, invincible to your characters. What would that look like? You have a completely invincible character who's going to fight and grind your players into a pulp. That doesn't seem very fun to me.
Sure.
So I would probably still allow the critical.
Yeah, I'm in total agreement with that. That's how I feel. But I guess it's a thing which it kind of depends on your system. It's another one of those, like for me, it's the consistency of like what you're giving out as a player is what you're also going to get, kind of thing.
Yep.
Or vice versa.
I don't care how armored you are. If they hit a critical, they found a chink in your armor.
Yeah.
And you're like, dang it, they found that one spot in the armpit that's unprotected.
So I lean that way too. I just kind of wondered what your thoughts were on that. So question number 2 here. So that was from Wataya Hotel. And then we have a kind of 2-parter from Evan. And he says this as I pull up the email. Haversack question batch, November 8th. Good day, M and A. First question being, if your current player characters were to rise to positions of leadership in a guild or government or other organization, how would you run its development?
I am not a good person to ask for this. I hate the idea of trying to bring along an organization as you're also trying to go and do your adventure. And when everybody starts getting like this cohort of people in this organization that they're part of and this other, my tendency is to say, you've got to like put a second in command, or you've got to like initiate some orders and then leave and hope they get carried out. But I think if I sat down and put thought into it, and I'm sure there are other people who have put thought into it, that you could make that organization and the way it works be a bigger part of your campaign and how it happens. What I always want to stay away from is too many people who are not player characters taking action in a game that influences everything. So it's like, okay, I've got my guild of thieves out there and 2 of them go break in and get this thing because I sent them out to get this thing. I'd rather have my players do that. I'd rather have my players risking their lives and trying to do something like, okay, I sent 2 guys. Oh, one of them got caught and now he's being held. Yeah, you could work that into everything, but the more of that you get, the more it turns out. It's like when you have 17 NPCs and you have a battle going and you're like, okay, now this NPC jumps in and takes a swipe. I have this one girl named Amira who's been traveling with the party in Dormant Mind, and I'm always torn because like she's pretty strong, she's pretty powerful. I don't want her taking over the battle and saving the NPCs every time. I want the NPCs to control the outcome of the battle, and I want her to be there who can help maybe, but I don't want like 7 people doing that. If I have like 7 people all taking their turn in the battle and making a difference in the outcome, it feels less player centric, less, it just turns into like a real chore to get through everybody too. So I don't know. I've never done a lot of letting organizations take roles, but I can see where there might be ways to do that where they're not involved in the battle, but like you set some things in motion and that changes the way of the game, and all off-screen sorts of stuff could happen that might be pretty neat. So I don't know. What do you think, Adam? Have you ever thought about guilds and leadership of guilds and government organizations?
Not a ton. I was going to say, kind of related to what you were saying, nothing sucks the fun out of my GMing more than having to like fight myself, where it's like, well, this NPC attacks this NPC. You guys can all just sit there and watch me while I roll dice. And now I'm going to run this player character who the player couldn't be here tonight. So he's going to attack now. Oh, I don't hit myself. And, it's like, like that's. So trying to keep, which I don't know. I don't know if that's exactly what,
what might be able to be done. Let's say, okay, we're thinking of battle. So, and we're thinking of like, okay, a barbarian he's fighting and he has, let's move it out of that. Let's move it to social interaction. Maybe this is a way someone who is a bard or someone who is, highly social and skill based could do stuff in the world, and maybe that could be really cool. I think I would have to have some like concrete examples in order to really get my mind around what I could do with it. And unfortunately or fortunately, I haven't had a lot of players in my games who like seek to become leaders in the guild or seek to become a high ranking public official that I've had to really work through this. I'd be interested to hear if any of you ascending GMs out there who listen to this have had really good experiences with this, what that looked like for your game. Throw those in a comment or throw those in an email to us at riseofthegm@gmail.com and let us know, hey, this is how it worked for me. And it was really pretty cool because you might open a new way that I can run something in my game that I would love.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I will say, so taking it even like a different place. So say one of your characters has become the leader of the Perfumers Guild, going back to that.
All those perfumers.
Back in the Perfumers Guild. And I do think there's three things that come to mind as far as like, how can I play around with the guild? One is just to be like, okay, I as the GM am going to kind of direct, these are the things that are happening. So when, character B over here is like, I want to check in with the guild and have them give me their reports, and that people, I'm just kind of as the GM, give a story. These people are going to come, they're going to talk, they're going to send letters to them, letting them know how the production's going or sales, or here's the problems we're having or whatever. So I think there's one aspect of like, okay, the GM is GM centric, telling the story. This stuff's happening over here while you're over adventuring, but now you're being filled in on it. I think there's like a way to do that randomly also, maybe of, okay, we're going to let some roles happen and tell us, this feels a little more like that solo play or table run thing of, is the Perfumers Guild being successful in this month of traveling? No, they lost a lot of money, kind of thing.
Perfume is on the outs.
Perfume is on the outs. Like, no, everybody's going El Natural, kind of thing. And so, like that I think you could do that also, kind of deal. And, but then maybe the other thing of, if you have a more hands-on player who's like, no, these are the things I really want to get into this guild, and I want to see this, and this happen, and it may be like, okay, well, let's bring in some of those social roles of being a little bit bigger. It's not like in the moment, but it's like, okay, how are you being persuasive to get these sales up of perfume? How are you intimidating the competition, kind of thing, and having some of those roles, but also maybe there's some stuff on the other side. So I think you could do some of that, where I definitely feel like telling some story is cool, making it more random. I probably would bring it more to I'm going to come up with some ideas about how things are changing in the world and bring those in and share those with the player. But if they're wanting to specifically see stuff happen, then you want to give them some agency in that too, at least to like delegate stuff while they're away, kind of deal. So that, trying to think from that kind of point of view, the organization's over here functioning while they're out here fighting dragons, is like, I think you can play around with that a little bit. But I'd love to hear, if other people have thoughts, that'd be a good one, because I don't know that I have all that much experience, with it. So Evan asked another question.
Okay.
And he is asking about bigger stuff here. What sort of planes of reality, worlds behind worlds, pocket dimensions, or alternate timelines have you used to get effect? How close does your cosmology match with default Pathfinder or D&D?
So I don't know that I've ever sat down and fully figured out the cosmology. like what planes exist where. I definitely will throw in planes of reality. Typically, there are ones that have very specific plane of fire, plane of water, even plane of air I've had in there. But I don't know the whole cosmology behind everything. I do know I just ran a whole arc of a session where my players went down to the like 472nd layer of hell named Occipitus. And in this layer, there were certain things. And so I know there's some cosmology about the layers of hell that happen. And that's like part of the whole planes of existence thing.
Yeah.
I never really, I think it would be neat to sit down and kind of get all that straight in my head. It's probably just one of my laziness things that I haven't. But I will often use, you've, been sent to another dimension. And that's like, maybe not even like fully fleshed out or articulated. What is this dimension? And then after so many rounds, they come back. It's just like they're out of the battle for 2 rounds or 3 rounds. I don't really go into like, when you're here, this is what it looks like. So I guess that'd be more like a pocket dimension. I do know we have a player playing with us now named Royal who he had a whole campaign set where a guy who was being searched by some very powerful beings, gods actually, was put into a pocket dimension so they couldn't find him. And he lived his whole, he started his existence all there, not knowing he was in a pocket dimension. It was very much like the world we live in now. But he was hidden from the gods until a certain point in the game. And he probably knows more about the cosmology and about how those different planes all relate to one another. I do think there's some really cool ideology that can happen out of that. I don't know that I've done too much with alternate timelines, but I do use pocket dimensions and other dimensions and some planar dimensions just as needed in my games. Yeah. And I would like to get more of that understanding of cosmology.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would say for me, my cosmology is very patchwork. A lot of times it's like, what do I want? so exactly. what do I need in the moment? And I haven't felt very like connected with any specific like canon stuff or very constrained by it. I guess I like this looks good from this and this looks good from this, and oh shoot, I have Pathfinder living together with D&D, and well,
same thing happens with gods, so, right? With the deities and stuff. Yeah, right. There's a whole like hierarchy of deities and named deities in 3.5, and then in Pathfinder, I think, and then in 5, they're different. And I think this has somewhat to do, if you're running a campaign that's written, you're going to stick with that stuff more. But if you're like us, where you're just kind of creating what works, you're going to grab, I love the Raven Queen from here. And she's really a kind of an ideal person who's like all about, the passing from life to death. And, I need that. Who else do I need? I need, the sun god to come in here. And you just kind of pick and choose from all over. And then you're like, oh man, I've got somebody from D&D 3.5. I got an AD&D god. I've got this god from 5e. Right, let's just make them work. Smash them together.
That's absolutely, that's how I function a lot. And I like looking, I think it may be a attention span thing for me, because I really love like open the book up and it's talking about like the planes, and I'm like, oh, this is like really cool how this is all connected. And I love the idea of like thin places between the planes that like things interact and like things can get in and kind of you get crossover. I love the idea of that. Evan, who's asked this question, he ran a game. I remember being in a game where we were in the like City of Brass, where there's like planar things happening there. And I remember loving that. Like, I love the idea of, I love playing in that stuff. I don't do a great job of running it as far as like maybe more canon things. I feel like I use planes actually a lot more, how to put this, like in passing, and or to like interact with shortly and then come back out of, rather than kind of get into and like do a lot in. Though I do think there's like a really cool, like the Occipitus thing you brought up, Matthew, like that was awesome because it's another change of scenery. And it's like, this feels so different, and I won't walk through all the things because may make people squeamish, but it's like very like, yeah, yeah.
Undulating flesh and pus
Like
pools and
things like
stuff.
not awesome to think about, but it was like, this is awesome as far as like, wow, this is a completely different terrain from that like grassy hill that we were fighting on earlier, kind of thing, or walking through. But for me, like one of the things I have done that I think brings like just an interest to things, like there was a point where people essentially it was a teleport. Functionally, it was a teleport, but the teleport spell, the way that they were being transported, story wise, was this person actually shot them through a thin place of a plane to another place, basically to another fold to get them to this other place. So for a very split second, the party passed through the plane of fire. So there was this moment of like they just saw it. It's almost like when you're on a train, and you pass through this thing and you see it briefly and then you're back in the tunnel, kind of thing. Like that's kind of what the thought process was of they saw all this stuff, but then they were out and it's like, okay, what that was trying to do was say there are other places, like other planes exist and we may be entering into that. It was a little bit of foreshadowing for the future. That was a Pathfinder game I ran a long time ago, but so I've done it that way, or like in the current game, our groups interacted and I thought it was fun. I think everybody else did too, but they have an item that there were some people that were kind of after them had been making use of, but it's planar.
The box.
The box, yeah. And the party interacted with it and got sent into this place, and it actually opened up some foreshadowing for some other things that are going on. But the NPCs that had owned it, it was kind of their like personal little torture chamber that they were using to go into this other plane, do terrible things, and then they could come back and it's like, well, that was somewhere else, kind of deal.
My hands are clean. Nobody knows.
Yeah, right. So we're gonna go like interrogate somebody, over here. But it has things to do with the greater scheme of the story. So I thought that was interesting, and that was one of those like crossroad points for me where I guess in that moment, in the initial moment, you all the party was split. So maybe there was a little bit less of a chance that you were going to go like running off into the plane of fire. But that was a crossroads moment. And I guess still is, because it's still in the hands of the party, where it's like, when is the day going to be where everybody goes in the plane of fire and decides to go explore,
Tomorrow.
Tonight. Oh no. So that's a thing, but the group like went in, explored that area, kind of opened up out of this cavern, realizing, oh shoot, we're like in a very different place. I think it's time to go back, kind of thing. And that was the choice at that moment. But again, it's for me, it's about making the world bigger, the universe bigger, where it's like, okay, there are these other places. We're not all there is. This bubble that we're seeing is not all there is. And allowing that to be, okay, there could be a time when the story moves into those. But I haven't ever been like, all right, we're going to do like plane jumping. I don't remember that being a thing in any of the games that I really ran. Now, I'm talking a lot here, sorry. But one thing, it's not really an alternate timeline necessarily. But there was a game where it's actually that Pathfinder game I was referencing where they went through the plane of fire briefly. At the end, and I know this gets weird and wibbly wobbly and everything, but engaging with a person's memories affected history. And I know that's like really weird and not very scientific at all, but like it's a fancy game, they interacted with this person's memories, and it did change the timeline because they were able to go into like essentially combats that happened where this person in history had victory, and they went in and changed the story to be victory on the side of good, on their what they were fighting for. And because they had done those things, when they came back, history had been changed. So I don't know where that falls in that, but that was a really fun thing where it's like they had heard about these defeats on their side that had happened in the past throughout the game. So when they finally got to this place where it's like, okay, we can actually affect change and turn the tide, it brought it back around. And I would say that probably fits more into that alternate timeline kind of situation. And it was pretty interesting to see like how they did that and realizing, oh, we're in this place now. Like we're actually setting foot into the place that we've heard about. So that was cool.
All right, guys, good questions. Keep those questions coming. And remember, you can always check out our stuff on Rise of the GM on Instagram, Rise of the GM on X. Send us questions just like this to riseofthegm@gmail.com. We're always eager to hear. Don't forget to join us next time. As we talk about what it takes to kind of plan for and get an arc going. So we enjoyed having you here with us today. Join us next time on Rise of the GM.
Thanks all.